So this is a video I wasn't sure how to make without looking weird. I mean, trains have like actual fanatics, people who hunt down models and travel by train just for the fuck of it, and I ain't one to kink shame anyone, but that is not me. Still, I can't help but deny how chill train rides can be. Plop on some headphones, tune out, and admire the fact that I don't live in all that ugly of a country. It's nice. In games though, trains can be much more than a simple mode of transport. Big enclosements, big characters, big murders, big suspicion. Who could it be? I don't know. Trains is a mystery. Final Fantasy VII has some train sequences. It starts off with one arriving for one, and has a few later on where it allows characters to be themselves, having just 9/11 the Nero's Maka reactor and all, showing these otherwise minor people like Jesse to be caring, Wedge to be silly, Biggs to be tough, and Cloud to be even tougher. Not to mention giving Barrett center stage as the big businessman harassing boy he be, spouting some lore regarding the main conflict and setting up Midgar as a punk-laden, grimy Mad Max-esque shithole and some other stuff that I probably already talked about here.
You also get to hijack a train way later on. Very cool.
But the Final Fantasy entries in which trains truly shine would have to be 8 and 15.
But what about 6?
Shut up. I'll get to it. In 8, in any case, the trains are used to similar effect, only it's much more character-driven, less expository, and cover much larger swaths of the full game. Thing is that the main cast here does not get along. Squall, for example, is an awkward loner who gets anxious when talking to people, hiding it by pretending not to care, and yet, out of all people, they appoint him to be the leader of the high school mercenary militia, don't ask. Consisting out of his former tutor who has a crush on him despite him hating her cause he no understand, a man who functions much like an overexcited puppy, thus annoying him in every way possible, a pretty princess who also likes him while simultaneously expecting him to be a prince with shining fucks to give, seeing as he is yet to find any, a ladies' man asshole who is cripplingly insecure as well, and finally, a girl who acts like a child, thus also pissing him off. All of which culminating in one giant soap opera where nobody gets along, everyone falls in love, but never fuck. Starring Frustrate, Minor Relate, but most of all, Separate. What with Squall telling everyone to fuck off and leave him be them all. Can't really do that on a train though, which is why it's a good thing that most of the early game's travelage happens within one. Okay, yeah, so things escalate a little bit. For one, Irvine immediately goes into harass Selphie, though she don't notice, seeing as she's too busy having the mental capacity of a 6-year-old. Squall and Zell also have a moment where Zell tries to get to know the boy only for Squall to blow him off within her monologues, and to say that Rinoa's very own train cabin doesn't say a metric fuck ton about her as a person would be understating it just a little. Basically, tensions are high right from the get-go, signified perfectly by Squall be gone thoughting Rinoa out of the way at every interval. Shit's cute. Anyway, a big reason that she has her own train cart to begin with, well, besides being horrendously spoiled, is because she's the leader of the train-based resistance faction. Can't have your shit raided by fascists if you're always on the go after all. And they have a plan. Being that
El Presidente
is on his way to meet the dictator sorceress by train, making it a good opportunity to kidnap, interrogate, and extort the man. And we plan to do this using teamwork! Climbing on top of trains and all that, with code dialing minigames and buckets of 90s Squaresoft money whizzing by in cinematic fashion, all to connect the president's train car to theirs. Even without this being a good example of forcing these people to band together to strengthen this flimsily made introductory point of this video, it is also very cool. But, of course, the president turns out to be a zombie decoy, thus causing our cast to experience defeat for the first time, followed by disappointed. Knowing them, they'll sort this out just fine. They do that, by the way, in the fully fledged train-themed town of Timber, stylized as one giant train station where rails flow like canals, and tiny little stairways and girders coat the architecture reminiscent of European-style train stations. trains. And after fucking about there for a good while and playing with cats and Franking it up from the local Gestapo, they get back on that goddamn train once again, off to Delling City, where they get shot, stabbed, imprisoned, and killed. End of disc 1. And yeah, one might argue that when taken into the greater context of the game, all of these moments amount to dick. And while I would agree to a degree, I do think that devalues the stuff that's there to learn from and appreciate, as I'd say that this shit highlights the potential of trains in games perfectly, essentially showing them to be a type of storytelling magnifying glass, amplifying traits and exposing relationships for what they truly are, so that they may be addressed or developed any which way. In Final Fantasy XV, though, things get considerably more sad boys. It is quite the happy game overall, about a crop of cheerful children going on a road trip circling around a small continent for 20 hours getting mad romantic. Comfortable, I guess, is what I describe it as. Kinda samey, not very hard, just kinda hanging out really. But then, mid-game spoilers happen, and the boys are forced on a roller coaster ride on train, crash coursing towards the end rapidly. And like most players, they too resent this notion and start quarreling amongst themselves. In a way, it's kinda like the opposite approach that Final Fantasy VIII took, as in that 8 used trains to build up its characters and 15 uses them to break them down, stuffing the lads into a tight spot where avoiding each other becomes impossible. Now, of course, the pacing in general dungs on itself big time here, but the NPCs and radio discussions, the weirdly claustrophobic run-ins with our main villain, the exciting square money-based rooftop battles, and the very sad reflective moments that see them bumping into old friends and making some new ones, as well as shit being rather self-aware tonally given how the game just ripped away the structure and toolset that you were used to, make it work almost kind of. Sure, shit's clunky as fuck, but it's also memorable and absolutely one of the stronger story bits of the game overall. And besides, you get to see some giant ice boobies either way. Rounding this section off, I also wanted to highlight some minor instances where trains are used for developmental and expository purposes. Rise of Nightmares, for example, a Kinect game made by the House of the Dead team that is awesome, starts off on a train and linearly shows off all of its main characters going forward, getting you to resent the Euro teens, creating vendettas with the Russian ice queens, and getting your mystery boners on for the posh British lady and the gypsy. It's not much, but it makes many of the events following it just a smidge more meaningful given that you want everyone to die.
Those curves.
And in this game called Tulip, you travel by train quite frequently, bumping into recurring characters during rush hour on the daily, allowing them to have long-form arcs affected by you interacting with them in and around train. Though, more on that in my Tulip video. Plug, wink wink. And finally, I can't go without at least mentioning Animal Crossing, where it doesn't so much establish any characters or tonalities or plot per se, but it instead establishes you through menial stranger danger tier train banter, which is cute as all fuck. First thing to come to mind when Mystery Train was The Last Express, a game that I have not played and thus can't say much about other than it looks cool. What with its hand-drawn rotoscope graphics and all, it easily could have been a Sing title if Sing had said,
Frame rate? What the fuck is that?
I'm only joking, of course. I know that this is one of the first games to use rotoscoping like this other than Prince of Persia, which was directed and written by the same guy. And it also came out in like 1997, so it's fine. But in either case, I take it that despite it selling like ass and using tropes seen in many an old movie, it still made quite the impact given that there's loads of games that do something similar. And by loads, I mean 2. Being the 3rd season of Telltale Sammun-Mak and Paper Mario The Old Ass Door. Both featuring a luxurious cabin-laden train with fancy bar and restaurant, eccentric posh people with funny accents, and of course a murder and/or thingy gone missing. Granted, that's most adventure games, but much like character development, the whodunit gameplay becomes rather condensed and focused when set on train. I mean, there's nowhere to run and nowhere to hide, and only the bestest sleuthing and lying techniques can cover and uncover the various asses on board. Now, as for the Sammun-Mak one, I don't actually remember all too much. I haven't touched the game since 2010, though as I recall, someone stole a thing, thus making you detectivo your way about the place, harassing and interrogating all of the strange cartoony passengers. And the Paper Mario one, which I do remember, was also about someone stealing a thing and having you harass and interrogate all of the zany Nintendo charmed up passengers. Both are cool and both take shit in their own weird, fascinating directions. Like in S&M, for instance, they end up finding the bones of their forefathers along with an old film reel, letting them take a peek at what got them all boned up like that. Being that they were on their way to a tomb to steal some shit, and on their way there you get to lounge around the train getting to know those on board, and on their way back, post-tomb raidage, some fucker ends up stealing the shit that they stole, thus needing to use the prior knowledge of the people on board to figure out who what done it. It's neat. And in Mario, you first need to tango with the Mafia to be able to board the damn thing in the first place, which already makes things feel sketch as fuck. And then once you do, you start getting notes shoved up door about sticky yummy dooms awaiting you, only to then have to team up with this gumshoe rat detective with charm and comedy on full blast. It is also neat. Now, I'm not gonna go as in-depth on these as I did with 8, as either of them would be worth their own videos, and I also still want to review the other 2 sammun-mak seasons given how well my review of the first one did.
My audience loves Western-made games.
Plus, knowing me, I'd much rather talk about
Equal.
Imagine being stuck on a driving train alone, when suddenly you sense a presence, frantically moving from car to car, seeing no one, yet still feeling followed. Catch the horror train, motherfuckers, as there's nothing quite like a wee deviation into classic Halloweenish horror in an otherwise non-spooky game, which is what Final Fantasy VI does, unlike any other. I mean, being a game with many memorable moments, I'd say that it says quite a lot that this one sticks out as much as it does. Well, truth be told, Sabin suplexing the damn thing near the end probably had something to do with that, but still, it's a cool-ass bit with a cool-ass song. Basically, your characters are lost in a spooky dark forest and end up finding a train just kinda sitting there. Of course, they're all like, LOL, what could go wrong? Let's hop aboard. But then things do go wrong, as it ends up being haunted, taking off before they can even leave. There's people on board, sure, but their status among the living is questionable at best, and there's also just some pretty blatant ghosts hanging around for good measure, making things pretty darn obvious. FF6 is not one for slow build-ups, you see. Shit crescendos fast. And where this could have been rather detrimental as far as horror sections go, it goes from, hey, an empty train, to, hey, we're surrounded by ghosts, to finding out that the entire thing's alive and suplexing it all within the time span of about 15 minutes, making it about as exciting of a bite-sized spook as can be. Not to mention how it ends with Cyan seeing his recently deceased loved ones hopping aboard. It all stays fairly simple, never going too far into emo territories, and yet it still remains one of the most adorably memorable vignettes ever created. Real-ass horror games call for some real-ass trains, as is the case in both Silent Hill 3 and RE0. And yeah, I've actually done a video on Silent Hill 3's metro and sewer levels before, kind of, but my rights were still a fuck, and I also kinda glossed over the bit where you actually get stuck in a train for a few minutes, so shut up, it's fine. It's an interesting moment in any case. I mean, besides the whole who drive mystery, you're also forced to fight the dick legs with no room to properly do so or to avoid them. It's a brief moment, absolutely, but the slight escalation of fuckness from train cart to train cart still makes it a cool little psychological set piece, as it were. And similar ideas were used to much greater effect in the early game of Resident Evil 0. See, Normally in Resi, you're dealing with rather large areas. A big open city, an entire village, a giant mansion, a police station, and so on. And you spent the time Metroidvaniaing about these places, solving puzzles and mostly avoiding enemy encounters whenever possible, given that the health items and ammo are in short supply, of course. But out comes RE0 swinging its undead cock around saying, "Fuck that, tiny train." Much like Silent Hill 3, you're unable to dodge the boys, making for somewhat of a concentrated extract of the usual enemy negotiation as encounters go from "how do I kill as little of them so I can pass" to "how can I kill all of them as soon as possible before they fucking gank me." Shit's tense, especially on your first run. Puzzles are also put under the loop, by the way, with less inventory fuckery and more actual puzzles with interfaces and shit, and also just fucking look at this. Pre-rendered backgrounds on the PS1 typically suffered heavily from image compression, but on the GameCube that was much less of an issue. I don't think I have to point out how nice this looks. It really is like walking through an animated painting of sorts, with the very deliberate and contrast-heavy lighting, the rustic color palette, and the excellent angles that really highlight how narrow a train truly be, giving you the vibe that a zomboid can jump out or crawl out from just about any corner. So, to me, this train bit is all but the best bits of classic Resi amplified, leaving its weaker elements by the wayside like the backtracking and the big item management and focusing solely on giving you a tense, condensed experience with panic up the ass. Only for the rest of the game to fuck that up, of course. But yeah, this was definitely a video. I do want to say that anything I didn't mention wasn't mentioned because I don't know. I know about that one Zelda game that no one's played, I know how trains are often used in beat-em-ups, and I know that other horror and adventure games use them too, like Echo Knight, Siberia, Charnel House, or Cry of Fear, but believe it or not, I haven't actually played every video game ever. So to be able to highlight stuff properly with my veneer of anal cis facade, I need to use examples I'm deeply familiar with. Anyway, in any case, what I wanted to say was that trains force focus. Whether if that's in game design, overall pacing, character development, or combat, they're limiting spaces that require the devs to get more creative within said limitation. And so, I can't help but get kind of excited whenever a game has its proper train segments, because you may never know where shit might suddenly go. Things could get spooky or mysterious, or even turn into a stealth minigame like how what FFCC TCB did. Yeah.